She was on her knees on cold marble floors, blood on her lip, and Lee Jae-yong was still standing over her. The entire house had gone silent. Staff frozen in doorways. Crystal chandelier throwing cold light over everything. And in the corner of that massive foyer, in her wheelchair, Seo-yeon watched. Hands folded in her lap. Face unreadable. She didn't call for help. She didn't say a word. Isabel lifted her head slowly. Her cheek burned. Her hands were pressed flat against the marble, and she could feel the cold of it moving up through her palms into her chest. Every single person in that house was waiting for her to cry, apologize, fold herself small and disappear. She got up instead. Not fast. Not dramatic. She rose like something that had been pressed down for a long time and was done pretending it could stay there. She stood to her full height, looked Lee Jae-yong directly in the eyes, and said in a voice that didn't shake at all, "You can fire me. You cannot break me." Jae-yong's jaw tightened. "Get out of my house." "I will. After you hear me clearly." She took one step toward him. Security moved. She ignored them. "Do it again. I dare you." The room stopped breathing. And Seo-yeon, for the first time in 10 years, rolled her wheelchair forward, placed herself between her husband and the woman bleeding on his floor, looked up at him with eyes that had been quiet for a decade, and said 4 words. "Don't hit her again. If you think you know where this story goes, you don't. Stay with it. Because what happened before that moment, and everything that happened after, will wreck you in the best possible way. Like the video now if you're already feeling it, and let's go back to where this really started. Isabel Adeyemi did not come to Seoul looking for a fight. She came because the rent was 3 months overdue, because her daughter's school fees were due in 2 weeks, because her work visa in the UK had expired and the agency offered her one placement with a live-in position and a salary that made her breath catch. She came because she had no other options and she was smart enough to know it. The agency briefed her in a small office that smelled like printer toner and instant coffee. A woman with reading glasses pushed a folder across the desk. The household is prominent. Mr. Lee Jae-yong, founder and chairman of Hanseo Group. His wife, Seo-yeon Lee, requires full-time personal care following a spinal injury 3 years ago. She's partially paralyzed, uses a wheelchair. You'll be her primary carer, daily hygiene, physiotherapy exercises, meals, companionship. A pause. The position has had some turnover. How much turnover? The woman looked at her over the glasses. 4 carers in 18 months. Isabel said nothing. The salary reflects the difficulty of the environment. She signed the contract that afternoon. The house was not a house. It was a statement. A 6-story building in Hanamdong with a private courtyard, a staff wing, a lift that ran on a whisper, and floors so polished Isabel could see herself in them. She arrived with one large suitcase and stood in the entrance hall feeling like she had walked into a photograph of a life she was only allowed to clean. A woman in a grey uniform showed her to her room. Small, clean, with a window overlooking the garden. On the desk was a printed schedule, Seo-yeon's daily routine down to the minute. 6:30 wake. Medications at 7. Exercises at 8. Meals, appointments, rest times, everything mapped out like a military operation. Isabel read it twice and put it in the drawer. She would meet Seo-yeon first and figure out the rest from there. She knocked on the door of the master suite at exactly 6:30 the next morning. "Come in." The room was large and softly lit. Seo-yeon Lee was already sitting up in bed, her legs still beneath the covers, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She was younger than Isabel expected. Maybe 34, 35. Pale and pretty in the way of someone who had once been vibrant and was now carefully maintained. She looked at Isabel with an expression that was warm but cautious, like someone opening a door and checking the sky before they stepped out. "You're Isabel." "I am." "Your Korean is good." "I practiced on the flight." Seo-yeon smiled. It reached her eyes, just slightly. "Sit down. You don't have to stand at the door." Isabel sat in the chair by the window. The schedule said she had 40 minutes before the first medication. She used them to just talk. Seo-yeon asked where she was from, whether she'd been to Korea before, whether she liked spicy food. Normal questions. Easy questions. The kind people ask when they're deciding whether they can trust you. Then the door opened without a knock. Lee Jae-yong walked through his own bedroom like he was walking through a boardroom. Suit jacket over his arm. Phone already in his hand. He glanced at Isabel with a look that wasn't hostile, it was simply indifferent. She was furniture. "I have the Tokyo call at 8, he said to Seo-yeon. "Don't schedule anything for this evening, I have people coming." "I didn't schedule anything." He was already walking back toward the door. "Mr. Lee," Isabel said. He turned. Slowly. "I'm Isabel. I'll be caring for your wife." He looked at her for 2 full seconds. "I know who you are." He left. Seo-yeon watched the door close. Her hands were very still in her lap. Then she looked at Isabel and said quietly, almost like an explanation she was ashamed to have to give, "He's not always like this." Isabel nodded. She didn't say what she was thinking, which was that she'd heard those exact words before, from her own mother, standing in a kitchen doorway, and that they had never once been true. The first week taught her the geography of the tension. It lived in the East Wing after 9 in the evening when Jae-yong came home from the office. It lived in the way the housekeeper, Mrs. Park, moved faster when she heard his car in the drive. It lived in the small flinches, a staffer turning away, a glass set down carefully, conversations ending mid-sentence. It was a household trained to take up less space when he entered it. Isabel watched all of it. And she kept her head down. Because she needed this job. Because her daughter's name was Amora and she was 7 years old and clever and deserved better than a mother who kept walking away from difficult situations. She stayed. She learned. She kept her face neutral and her movements quiet. But she did not flinch. That was the thing Jae-yong noticed first. He came into the kitchen one morning while Isabel was preparing Seo-yeon's breakfast, medications lined up, porridge on the stove, fruit cut precisely because Seo-yeon's occupational therapist had recommended fine motor practice, and he opened the refrigerator, found that the imported mineral water he preferred had been placed on the wrong shelf, and said something in Korean that the housekeeper later refused to translate. Isabel looked up from the fruit. "The water is on the middle shelf. I moved it because the temperature distribution is more even there. If you prefer it at the bottom, I can move it back." Silence. He stared at her. She held the stare. He took the water from the middle shelf and left. Mrs. Park found Isabel later in the laundry room and grabbed her arm. "Don't," she said in careful English. "Please. Just don't." "Don't what?" "Look at him like that." "Like what?" Mrs. Park searched for the words. "Like you're not afraid." Isabel folded a towel. "I'm not." Mrs. Park looked at her for a long moment, something between pity and admiration crossing her face, and then walked away without another word. It was Seo-yeon who cracked Isabel open first. 3 weeks in, during their evening routine, the slow transfer from wheelchair to bed, the repositioning, the leg exercises that Seo-yeon tolerated stoically, Isabel noticed that Seo-yeon was somewhere else entirely. Present in body, gone in expression. "Where are you right now?" Isabel asked. Seo-yeon blinked. "Sorry." "You don't have to be sorry. Where were you?" A long pause. "Thinking about what I used to be able to do." She looked down at her legs under the blanket. "I used to dance. Not professionally. Just, I loved it. I danced at our wedding. Jae-yong doesn't dance, so I pulled his cousin onto the floor and we danced for 40 minutes and Jae-yong stood at the side and laughed." She stopped. "He laughed a lot, then." Isabel said nothing. She kept doing the exercises, moving Seo-yeon's leg through the gentle rotation the physiotherapist had prescribed. The silence was comfortable enough to hold the weight of what Seo-yeon had just put in it. "Do you want to talk about what changed?" Isabel asked. "No." Then, almost immediately, "Yes. But not tonight." "Okay." Isabel. "Yes. Thank you for not asking me if I'm okay. Everyone asks if I'm okay. It's exhausting pretending that I am." Isabel looked at her. "You don't have to pretend with me." Seo-yeon nodded once. pressed her lips together, looked at the ceiling until whatever was rising in her settled back down. The next morning Isabel braided her hair. She hadn't planned to. Seo-yeon's brush had snagged, and it was quicker to just work through the tangles section by section, and somewhere in the middle of it the task turned into something else. Something deliberate and gentle and unhurried. Isabel braided it in 2 long plaits and tied them with a ribbon from Seo-yeon's dressing table. Seo-yeon looked in the mirror and went absolutely still. Then she started to cry. Not loud, just silent tears running down her face in the reflection. "I'm sorry," Isabel started. "I shouldn't have." "No." Seo-yeon shook her head hard. "My mother used to braid my hair. She died 2 years before the accident." She touched the plaits with her fingertips. "I forgot what it felt like to have someone take care of me like I was." She stopped. "Like you were worth taking care of," Isabel finished. Seo-yeon closed her eyes. Isabel crouched down beside the wheelchair, put her hand over Seo-yeon's, and stayed there. That was all. No words, no reassurances. Just a hand and a presence. If you've ever had one person treat you with that kind of quiet dignity when everything else in your life was chaos, drop a comment below. Because what these 2 women built in that room is the emotional core of everything that follows. 3 weeks after that, Jae-yong came home early. Isabel heard the front door before Mrs. Park did. She was in the corridor outside Seo-yeon's sitting room, carrying a tray of afternoon tea, when she heard his voice, clipped, rapid, already elevated, before she could see him. "Told you not to confirm that meeting, Seo-yeon. I told you specifically." "I didn't confirm anything. I haven't spoken to your office in weeks." "Then why does my assistant have your name on the email? Explain that." "I don't know, Jae-yong, I genuinely don't." "You don't know." His voice dropped in a way that was somehow worse than shouting. "You never know anything, do you? You sit in this house all day, you have nothing else to do, and you still manage to." Isabel pushed the door open. Both of them turned. She set the tray down on the side table with careful, deliberate calm. Arranged the cups. Put the teapot at the center. She could feel Jae-yong's eyes burning the side of her face. "Get out," he said. "I'll be right outside the door," she said to Seo-yeon. "Isabel." His voice was a blade. "I said get out." She looked at him. 1 second. 2. Then she walked to the door, and just before she closed it she heard Seo-yeon say, very quietly, "Please don't." She didn't know if Seo-yeon was talking to Jae-yong or to her. She stood in the corridor with her back against the wall and her fists closed at her sides and her jaw so tight it ached, and she listened to the murmur of his voice through the door for 4 more minutes until it stopped and his footsteps moved away. She went back in. Seo-yeon was in her wheelchair by the window, looking at the garden. Her tea sat untouched. Isabel sat across from her. "Seo-yeon. Don't. I need to ask you something." "Isabel. How long has this been going on?" Seo-yeon was quiet for so long that Isabel thought she wasn't going to answer. Then. "Since before the accident. And after, it got worse. Because now I can't." She stopped. Started again. "I can't go anywhere. I can't just walk out. I can't pack a bag and leave in the middle of the night the way I used to threaten to. I'm here. I'm always here. And so is he." Isabel leaned forward. "What happened the night of the accident?" Seo-yeon turned to look at her. Really look at her. "We were arguing in the car," she said. "A real argument. The worst one we'd ever had. He was driving and I said something and he turned to shout at me and he didn't see the truck coming from the right." She said it without drama, without self-pity, like she'd rehearsed it so many times it had become flat. "He walked away. Fractured collarbone. I didn't walk away. T6 spinal injury. Partial paralysis. Permanent." The room was very quiet. "He's never forgiven himself," Seo-yeon continued. "Which sounds like it should make things better. It makes things worse. Because his guilt turns into anger and his anger comes out on everyone around him and mostly on me. And I think some part of him resents me for being the proof of what he did. And she pressed her lips together. I don't have anywhere to go. My mother is gone. My brother is in Canada. I have no income of my own. Everything I have is his. She looked at Isabel with eyes that were tired and clear and honest. So I stay. And I keep quiet. And I count the days. Isabel held her gaze and said nothing for a long moment. You're not going to tell me to leave him, Seo-yeon said. It wasn't a question. No. Everyone else tells me to leave. Everyone else isn't sitting in this room. Then what do you think? Isabel looked at her hands. I think that you've survived something that would have finished most people. And I think you deserve more than counting days. And I think, she paused. I think something is going to change. I don't know what or when. But it is. Seo-yeon almost smiled. You sound certain. I am. What Isabel didn't say, what she wasn't ready to say to anyone yet, not even herself, was that she had grown up watching her own mother count days in a house just like this one. That she had left at 16 with a bag and a bus ticket and a rage that had taken her 10 years to understand. That she had taken this job because the moment she read Seo-yeon's file she felt something move in her chest that she hadn't felt in a long time. Recognition. It was a Tuesday in November when everything broke. Jae-yong had been in Tokyo for 4 days. The house breathed easier when he was away, not dramatically different, just 2 degrees warmer, like a window cracked open. Isabel and Seo-yeon had fallen into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Meals together. A drama series they were watching on the television. An evening where Seo-yeon talked for 2 hours about her years as a textile designer before the accident, pulling up images on her phone with the enthusiasm of someone allowed to remember who they used to be. Then his flight landed early. Isabel found out the way everyone in that house found out. Mrs. Park appeared in the doorway of the kitchen looking like she'd seen a weather warning, and said only, "His home," and moved away quickly. Isabel was in the middle of reorganizing the medication shelf in Seo-yeon's sitting room. The doctor had prescribed a new supplement and the arrangement no longer made sense. The most frequently used items were buried behind the ones they used twice weekly. She spent 20 minutes reorganizing it into a logical system, labeled everything clearly, and was still in the room when Jae-yong walked in. He stopped. He looked at the shelf. What happened to this? I reorganized it. The new prescription. You moved things. His voice was quiet. The worst kind of quiet. Yes. The arrangement wasn't. You moved things in my wife's room without asking. Isabel set down the label in her hand. I asked Seo-yeon. She said it was fine. He turned to look at Seo-yeon, who was in her chair by the desk. You approved this. Jae-yong, it's just the medication. It's not about the medication. He stepped into the room fully, and Isabel felt the atmosphere change the way the air changes before lightning. It's about the fact that this woman, who has been in this house for 6 weeks, thinks she has the right to rearrange anything she likes without my permission. This is my house. It is, Isabel said. And I'm employed here to care for your wife. Part of that is ensuring her medication is accessible and organized correctly. I did my job. He looked at her slowly. Watch how you speak to me. I'm speaking to you respectfully. I said watch it. Jae-yong, Seo-yeon began. Stay out of this. He took 2 steps toward Isabel. She held her ground. You think because she likes you, because you've made yourself comfortable here, that you have standing to speak to me that way. I think that I have standing to speak to anyone respectfully and to expect the same in return. The room contracted. Later, the housekeeper would say she heard the sound from 2 floors down. The slap was open-palmed and fast. Isabel's head snapped to the side. She staggered, just slightly, and caught herself on the edge of the shelf. She could feel the heat of it spreading across her cheek immediately, and somewhere at the back of her teeth there was the iron taste of blood. Silence. Total, absolute silence. Mrs. Park, who had been passing in the corridor, appeared in the doorway and went pale. Behind Jae-yong, Seo-yeon sat completely still, hands frozen in her lap, face drained of color. Her mouth was open but nothing came out. Isabel turned her head back slowly. She looked at Lee Jae-yong. He was breathing hard. He looked like a man who had just heard himself say something he couldn't take back, shocked by what he'd done but not yet sorry enough to undo it. His hands hung at his sides. Nobody moved. And then Isabel moved. She pushed off the shelf, stepped forward, and shoved him. Hard. Both palms flat against his chest. He was bigger than her and heavier, but the force and the shock of it sent him back 2 full steps into the wall. A painting rattled. Someone in the doorway gasped. Security appeared, 2 of them, from nowhere, and moved toward her. She turned to face them with blood on her lip and her chest heaving, and she said, "Touch me. Go ahead." They stopped. She turned back to Jae-yong. "You want to fire me? Fire me. You want to call the police? Call them. I'm standing right here." Her voice was shaking, not with fear, with fury. "You do not get to put your hands on me. You do not get to put your hands on her. And if you think that money or this house or that suit makes it acceptable, it doesn't. It never has. It never will." Jae-yong stared at her. "Get out of my house." "I will." She bent down and picked up her cloth from the floor with complete composure. "After you hear me clearly. Do it again." She looked him dead in the eye. "I dare you." The room held its breath. And then the wheelchair moved. Seo-yeon rolled between them. Not fast, the carpet slowed her, but with intention. She placed herself in the space between Isabel and Jae-yong, and she looked up at her husband. His face changed. The anger didn't vanish, but something underneath it shifted, like a foundation cracking. "Don't hit her again," Seo-yeon said. 4 words. Flat. Quiet. Final. Jae-yong opened his mouth and closed it again. Something crossed his face that might have been shame, if it was allowed to be. Then he straightened his jacket, stepped back, and walked out of the room. Subscribe right now if you want to know what happened next. Because what's coming will completely change how you see every single person in this story. By 9 the next morning, the video was everywhere. One of the junior housekeeping staff, a 22-year-old who had been standing in the corridor when everything happened, had filmed the last 40 seconds of it on her phone. Isabel shoving Jae-yong into the wall. Isabel's voice. Seo-yeon rolling forward. The 4 words. It had been posted at midnight. By 9 it had 4 million views. The comments were split, loud, and merciless. She should be arrested. He's the one who should be arrested. That man hit a woman in his own house while his disabled wife watched. That maid assaulted the CEO of Hanseo Group. She's a hero. She's going to lose everything. The Hanseo Group board convened an emergency call. Jae-yong's PR team arrived at the house by 8. Isabel sat in her room with her door closed and her phone off and drank her coffee and waited. At 10, a man in a very expensive suit knocked on her door. He introduced himself as the company's head of legal affairs, and he placed a document on her desk and explained, without blinking, that the number at the bottom was hers if she was willing to sign. Isabel looked at the number for a long time. It was more money than she had made in 5 years combined. She folded the document in half and handed it back. "No." The man blinked. "Ms. Adeyemi, I'd encourage you to." "I'm not finished." She met his eyes. "He hit me. In front of witnesses. There is footage. You're sitting in front of me offering money to make that disappear, and I want you to think very carefully about what you're asking me to erase. Ms. Adeyemi. What happens to the next person he does this to, if this disappears?" Silence. She stood up. "I think we're done here." He left. That afternoon she recorded herself on her phone, 2 minutes, sitting at her desk, speaking directly to the camera. She said what happened. She said what she was offered. She said she turned it down. She said she wasn't angry, she was tired of a world where enough money was supposed to make violence acceptable. She said she hoped Seo-yeon knew she wasn't doing this for a platform or a payout. She posted it. By evening it had 7 million views. What the internet didn't know, what none of them had access to, was what was happening behind the closed doors of the East Wing. Jae-yong had not left the house. He had retreated to his study and he had stayed there, and for the first time in a very long time he was sitting in a room that was completely silent and completely honest, and he had nowhere to put himself. He had watched Isabel's video 3 times. He had watched the original clip 6 times. He sat with a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched and stared at the wall. There is a particular kind of man who is dangerous not because he has no feelings but because he has buried them under so many layers of control and ambition and pride that when they finally surface, they come out as destruction. Jae-yong had spent 10 years being that man. 10 years building a wall between himself and the night on the Han River Expressway. 10 years waking up at 3 in the morning and feeling the sick lurch of it, the truck, the sound, the way Seo-yeon's body had gone still, and then getting up and going to the gym and going to the office and building things and acquiring things and staying in motion, because motion was the only thing that kept the wall intact. Isabel had knocked a section of it down. Not deliberately. Simply by refusing to behave as though he was above consequence. He picked up his phone. Put it down. Picked it up again. He walked to Seo-yeon's sitting room. She was at the window. She'd been at the window when he left last night, and she was at the window again now, like she was watching something specific in the garden that no one else could see. Seo-yeon. She didn't turn around. I need you to. Don't. Her voice was very quiet. Don't tell me what you need right now. He stood in the doorway. The board is calling for a statement, he said. Legal wants to. Jae-yong. She turned then. Her face was composed in the way of someone who has made a decision. I don't care about the board. You don't. I said I don't care. She wheeled toward him and stopped in the middle of the room and looked at him with eyes that had been patient for so long that the patience had finally turned into something else. Something without softness in it. You hit that woman. In front of me. You hit her because she moved medication on a shelf. And I sat there. Her voice cracked once and then steadied. I sat there and I said nothing. And I have been sitting and saying nothing for 3 years. For 10 years. Jae-yong was very still. I am so tired, Seo-yeon said. I am so deeply, completely tired. He moved then, not toward her, but to the chair nearby, and he sat down heavily, like something had been cut. He put his face in his hands. The room was quiet for a long time. Then he said, from behind his hands, in a voice she hadn't heard from him since the hospital, I'm sorry. Seo-yeon didn't move. I know that's not enough. I know that saying it doesn't. He stopped. When he looked up his eyes were raw. That night. On the expressway. I see it every single morning when I wake up. I see it and he shook his head. I don't know how to be in a room with you and not see it. I don't know how to look at you and not. Hate yourself, Seo-yeon said. Yes. So you hate me instead. He flinched. Because it's easier, she continued. Because I'm here and you're here and you can't fix it and you can't undo it, and so you pour all of that guilt into anger and you pour the anger at me because where else is it going to go? She said it without cruelty. Just with the flatness of someone stating a fact they've had a long time to understand. He said nothing. I know you're sorry, she said. I've always known you're sorry. But Jae-yong, her voice broke for real now, briefly, and she let it. Sorry doesn't give me back my legs. Sorry doesn't give me back the last 3 years. And sorry doesn't make it acceptable that you just hit an innocent woman who has been the kindest person in this house since she arrived. He looked at the floor. I want her to stay, Seo-yeon said. I want you to make it right with her. And then I need you to make some decisions about what happens to us, because I cannot keep doing this. He knocked on Isabel's door at 9 that evening. She opened it. Looked at him. Didn't say a word. He had no document, no lawyer, no prepared statement. He had nothing except himself, which was the least comfortable he'd been in many years. I owe you an apology, he said. You do. I'm giving one. I'm not going to explain it or justify it. I hit you. It was wrong. It was inexcusable. I am sorry. Isabel studied him for a long moment. She was very good at reading men who had spent decades learning to perform sincerity, and what she saw in his face now was not performance. It was the wreckage of a person who had finally run out of defenses. "I accept your apology," she said. "It doesn't mean it didn't happen. I know. And if it ever happens again." "It won't. If it ever happens again, I will not just push you into a wall." Something moved across his face. Almost a smile, except there was too much shame in it for that. "Understood," he said. He started to turn away. "Mr. Lee." He paused. She looked at him carefully. "She loves you. Underneath all of it, she still loves you. I don't know if that matters to you. But it's true." He stood in the corridor with his back to her for a moment. Then he walked away without answering. But she saw his shoulders change when she said it. "Don't go anywhere, because what happens next is the part of this story that will make you want to call someone you love." The investigative journalist found Isabel's past first. Her name was Cho Hyun-ji, and she was thorough, and she had been working on the Han Seo story for 2 days before she found the Lagos court records. 17-year-old Isabel Adeyemi, cited as a minor in a domestic violence case against her father. The case had been dismissed. The family had moved. The girl had eventually moved further, to London, then to nursing college, then to care work, then to a placement agency. She published it with more compassion than Isabel expected. The article said, "She did not run from violence. She turned toward it, professionally and personally, for 15 years. Every household she has worked in, she has left only when the person she was caring for no longer needed her. She has never broken an NDA. She has never spoken publicly about a family she worked for. Until now." The comments changed tone after that. Isabel read the article once. She closed it. She went to find Seo-yeon. Seo-yeon was in the garden. Their physiotherapist had been recommending outdoor time for weeks, and Isabel had been slowly, persistently nudging her toward it. She was in her wheelchair at the end of the stone path with a cup of tea cooling in her hand and her face turned up to November sun. "The article came out," Isabel said, sitting on the bench nearby. "I know. I read it. Are you okay?" Seo-yeon turned to look at her. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." "Isabel. The article talked about your father." "I know. I read it too. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that happened to you." Isabel was quiet for a moment. Then, "You know why I took this job?" "The money." "That too." She looked at the garden. "I read your file before I accepted the placement. The agency gives you the basics: age, condition, household structure. And something about your file," she shook her head slightly. "My mother stayed for 19 years. She counted her days too. She never got out." Seo-yeon was very still. "She died when I was 23. She stayed until she couldn't, and I used to be so angry at her for staying." Isabel's voice was steady, careful. "I understand now why people stay. I didn't then. But I do now. And when I read your file I thought, she deserves someone in that house who isn't afraid. Who isn't going to put her head down and keep quiet the way everyone else does." Seo-yeon put down her tea. "Isabel," she said softly, "you don't have to say anything." "I do." She reached over and took Isabel's hand. "You are the first person in 3 years who has made me feel like a person and not a problem to be managed." Isabel squeezed her hand. Didn't let go. "You're going to be okay," Isabel said. "I want you to hear that. You're going to be more than okay." The board removed Jae-yong as chairman 11 days after the video. It wasn't entirely because of Isabel. The assault footage had collided with 3 other ongoing investigations into his conduct, and the board had been looking for an exit for 18 months. The footage gave them cover. They used it. He resigned before they could force him. A clean statement, no admission of wrongdoing, effective immediately. Seo-yeon's lawyer, engaged quietly and confidentially, funded by her brother in Canada who had been waiting for his sister to be ready, filed for legal separation the same week. The settlement included the Hanam-dong property, a permanent care fund, and full financial independence. Jae-yong's solicitor called the lawyer. Jae-yong himself did not contest a single clause. On the day he moved out, the house was very quiet. Staff had been given the afternoon off. Isabel was upstairs in Seo-yeon's sitting room, folding laundry that didn't need folding, keeping her hands busy. She heard the front door close. She went to the window. Jae-yong stood beside the car for a moment. He was in a dark coat, one bag in hand. He looked up at the house and his face was complicated. Too many things at once. Grief, relief, guilt, loss. The face of a man who had everything and broke it and was now being handed the consequence. Isabel watched him. She didn't feel victory. She had expected to. She felt instead a kind of heavy sadness for what he could have been, what they could all have been, if he had made different choices at any of the forks in the road. If he had pulled over instead of kept driving that night. If he had gone to therapy. If he had found a way to be broken without breaking everything around him. He got in the car. The gate closed. Isabel stood at the window until the sound of the engine faded, and then she went back to folding the laundry. 6 months later. The house had changed. Smaller. First of all, Seo-yeon had sold the Hanamdong property 2 months after Jae-yong left and moved somewhere more human in scale. A terrace house in Mapo with a garden flat on the ground floor so the wheelchair moved easily and a kitchen big enough for 2 people to be in at the same time without negotiating. Isabel's room faced the garden. On a Saturday morning in May, she was doing something catastrophic to a recipe she'd found online, something involving gochujang and chicken that she had absolutely no business attempting, when the smoke alarm went off with a noise that functioned more or less as a siren. Isabel. Seo-yeon's voice from the hallway, half alarmed, half laughing. It's fine. It is absolutely not fine, something is burning. It's supposed to be that color. That is not a color food is supposed to be. Seo-yeon appeared in the kitchen doorway, phone in hand from where she'd been video calling her brother. She surveyed the smoke, the pan, the expression on Isabel's face, and burst out laughing. A real laugh, the kind that came from deep in the chest, unguarded, surprised at itself. Isabel pointed the spatula at her. You are not helping. I'm not trying to help. I'm documenting this. She held up the phone. Her brother's face on the screen was creased with laughter. I can hear you judging me. We are absolutely judging you, Seo-yeon said. In the most loving way possible. Isabel looked at her, laughing in the kitchen doorway, hair loose, wearing the ridiculous oversized cardigan she'd bought from the market 2 weeks ago, face open and bright in a way that had been entirely absent when Isabel first walked into that mansion in Hanamdong. She looked free. Isabel turned back to the pan and dealt with the damage quietly and smiled to herself in a way she didn't let Seo-yeon see. Later, when the food had been replaced by delivered jjajangmyeon and they were sitting in the living room with bowls in hand and the Saturday evening news murmuring in the background, Seo-yeon set her bowl down and looked at Isabel with a particular directness she developed over the last 6 months, the kind that came from a woman who had stopped saving her words for safe moments. I need to ask you something. Okay. That job in London. The one the agency called you about last month. Isabel kept her face neutral. I said no. I know. I heard you on the phone. She paused. Why? Isabel took a mouthful of noodles. Considered. Because I didn't want to go. Isabel. Because, she set her own bowl down. Looked at Seo-yeon honestly. Because the last place I want to be is anywhere that isn't here. Seo-yeon was quiet for a moment. You could have a simpler life. Fewer complications. Fewer complications is overrated. I need a lot of care. I know. I'm not going to get better. I know that too. Isabel met her eyes. I'm not staying because I think it's going to change. I'm staying because this is where I want to be. Because you're, she paused, finding the right word. Because you're my person. You know. That doesn't happen very often and I'm not walking away from it. Seo-yeon blinked. Once. Twice. Don't you dare cry into that jjajangmyeon, Isabel said. Seo-yeon laughed. It came out a little broken. I'm not crying. You're absolutely crying. I'm not. Isabel handed her a tissue. Seo-yeon took it. They sat there in the evening light of the small living room with their noodles going cold between them, and outside the garden was dark and quiet, and somewhere across the city the world was still noisy and complicated and full of people hurting each other in expensive houses. But in this room there was just this. Two women who found each other in the worst version of their lives and decided to build something better. There is a version of this story where Isabel is the hero and Jae-yong is the villain and Seo-yeon is the victim, and everyone ends up in their assigned places and the audience goes home satisfied. But that's not what this is. Jae-yong was not a monster. He was a man who loved someone and caused them irreparable harm, and could not find a way to live inside that truth without destroying everything around him. That is not an excuse. It is an explanation. The difference matters. Seo-yeon was not a victim. She was a woman in an impossible situation making impossible calculations every single day, trying to survive on the resources available to her, and doing it with more dignity than anyone gave her credit for. She didn't need saving. She needed someone to stand beside her until she could stand for herself. And Isabel was not a hero. She was a woman who was tired. Tired of silence. Tired of watching it happen again the way it had happened before. Tired of a world that asked women to absorb violence quietly and call it strength. She pushed back. That's all. Sometimes that's everything. If this story moved you, subscribe. More stories like this every week. Leave a comment. Was there a moment that hit you differently? And share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because somewhere out there is a Seo-yeon still counting her days, and she needs to know that it doesn't have to end there.